Hello and welcome to another edition of the What You Think podcast. My name is William Royal. I have with me, as always, my friend and my co-host, Max Ferris.
Howdy.
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 Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back again.
And another.
Yes.
What's going on?
Got
to shake the rust off a little bit, I feel.
Yeah.
I feel like that intro was a little rusty.
We put a little bit of degreaser on the pod a couple weeks ago, and then scheduling is hard.
So, yeah. You know, it's the fall. We just got stuff going on.
It's busy.
It has been busy.
Is fall always busy?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Is it busier for you because school starts up again?
Well, yeah, just in general. So, like, in the spring, my Saturdays are, like, totally free.
Well, you choose...
Everything's a choice.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything's a choice.
I just want to make sure that we're not saying your schedule is booked by things out of your control.
No.
You're watching football.
No. You're right. You're completely right.
Okay.
But it's not just football. It's like other stuff too. You know, I just feel like there's more going on in the fall.
No, I would agree.
Like, so yesterday,
I'm fidgeting with this a lot, but it's because
I
it's
see
in the
that.
wrong position.
Because it's in what?
It just feels weird.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Now you're leaning because
Yeah,
you
I'm
got too
leaning
much weight.
heavily.
Yeah. That's okay.
I
I'll riff while you do that.
Yeah.
So yesterday, we went to the TCU game. We'll get into that. We'll get into it later because, I mean, just a Cinderella story.
Okay.
It's just been phenomenal.
I wasn't really paying attention yesterday.
Not the game, just the season. It's been
okay.
so fun. But we went to the game yesterday, but then we had a church fundraiser right after that. And so we went straight to that, and which is great. Like, it's all good things. Busyness is not, synonymous with bad at all. It's like, it's good stuff. So
I agree.
So then we got home. It was probably, I think we left for the game at like 9:30, and I think we got home at like 6. So it was like a, full day of stuff. And then, yeah, I mean, today, same deal. It's like church in the morning, and then I have a meeting later today for like most of the evening. So it's like, it's fine. But but what ends up happening is Monday rolls back around. It's like, oh yeah, we're back. And then it's just like, because of that, I feel like everything ends up going faster. And so now it's November 6th, and we have Thanksgiving in like 3 weeks.
Right.
And then Christmas will be right around the corner.
Right.
And then it's the new year. And that's crazy. And then I feel like when spring comes around, because I feel like there's a little bit less going on over the weekends.
The holiday season is busy.
Oh, it's crazy. It's very busy.
Yeah.
I love it, though.
I do like it.
I kind of want to... You told me something the other day that I've been thinking about a little bit as it pertains to holidays.
Was it about Christmas music?
Yeah, and just the Christmas season in general.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do you remember what you said?
I said that, this is an original thought. Hannah said this to me the other day, is that the Christmas season is more exciting and enjoyable than the day itself.
100%.
And I think that if you don't get into the season early enough, the day just comes and goes, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, and then it's gone.
That also could be just a product of being in Texas. It doesn't ever feel too wintry.
Right, because it's typically pretty warm still.
Right, but I also do think that the season itself is better.
Okay, I agree with you, 100%. My question would be, so this is like everybody gets in a stink about this every year. Oh, it's not even Halloween yet, and now we're getting Christmas commercials on TV. Everyone's decorating for Christmas. Like, you walk into Target or whatever store, and they have all their Christmas stuff out.
Right.
And then people complain about that. But what you're saying is that's a good thing, essentially.
I feel like people complain about that less these days. I remember that being a big stink when we were growing up. But I feel like people get more excited about it earlier these days.
We should keep calling things a stink.
Did you call it a stink?
Yeah, I did, and then you did. And I just think it's funny.
It was on my brain. Maybe because you said it, yeah. Nice. That's funny.
Okay, so you're in. You're all for it.
So, and I'll say this. I do think that the stretching of the season is a product of consumerism because that's happening because stores want you to buy the stuff and buy it earlier. But I don't think it's a bad thing. No. Or maybe it is something that we have to accept.
So what do you say to people whose general idea is like, okay, but the whole thing is it essentially skips over other holidays. Like, do you have a
skipping over what holiday?
Well, like
Halloween.
For example, if you start too
Thanksgiving?
early, it skips over Halloween. If you start not quite that early, but let's say you're a November 1st Christmaser, you're skipping over Thanksgiving.
I would say that just pause for Thanksgiving. You
you
have the
still-
season happening, but there is no season of Thanksgiving. Just like there's no season of Valentine's, no season of July 4th. I think that
there is a Christmas season, though.
I do think so. Yes.
So here's maybe would you define the Christmas season as including November? Like, essentially, would you say Thanksgiving is included in the Christmas season? And it's just part of it. You ought to just celebrate it normally, and we should just assume mentally, like, when we get out of Halloween, that it's Christmas season and Thanksgiving is included in that. But it's separate.
I'll have to do some editing with
You're
that
gonna
one.
have to edit on that
Yeah. Wow. That's going on. What you think after dark?
Yeah.
Well, that side railed me. I'm fully
So
sidetracked.
you were saying they ought to be separated.
Gosh dang it. Christmas is a season, Thanksgiving is a day. Christmas came before. But pause the Christmas for the Thanksgiving.
Right.
And then continue on.
So the question is, can you listen to Christmas music before Thanksgiving?
I feel weird about that,
Okay.
but I'm excited about seeing decorations.
Okay. See, that's kind of where I land.
I won't listen to Christmas music on the radio. Maybe I'll play it in my house here and there. So in terms of music, no. But decorations, yes.
Okay, I kind of agree with that. Because I feel like growing up, I just like, especially when, before we had like Spotify and all that stuff, and you could just easily play all this music in your car, I would listen to the radio all the time. And so, man, as early as like November, it would just be Christmas music all the time. And there would be, a handful of those radio stations
Right.
that, like, for a month or two,
They're only
put their
Christmas.
normal stuff aside and just play Christmas music. And I always got really tired of it, so I kind of would make a mental note.
A hard, fast
that, like,
rule in your mind.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to listen to any of this before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Which I feel like musically is still plenty of time
I
to
agree.
enjoy. Because let's be honest.
There's not that much Christmas music
right.
out there.
And a couple weeks in, once you hear
Jingle Bells
or
five
freaking-
times,
yeah,
or
what's that Mariah Carey one.
all I Want for Christmas Is You. If I hear I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus more than 2 times, I'm over it.
The funny thing about that is I feel like, especially in stores, it's like they only play the Christmas songs you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like Santa Baby and I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus and
Just the weird ones.
Jingle Bell Rock.
I don't hate Jingle Bell Rock.
Really?
No. Or which one is that? Is that Rocking Around the Christmas Tree?
Jingle Bell,
I like that one.
Jingle Bell Rock.
That one's fun.
Really?
Yeah.
That always reminds me of that scene from Mean Girls. You know what I'm
Which
talking
is a
about?
good scene.
It's a great scene.
Yeah.
It's
So
hilarious.
then take back your statement.
Okay. Retracted.
Okay. Cool.
What was I gonna say? Oh, you mentioned like playing Christmas music around the house during Christmas time. I'll tell you what, man. There's not much better than like a nice evening gathering with people when there's just some Christmas music playing in the background.
Playing softly in the
And
background.
it is a total vibe.
We ought to do more Christmas gatherings.
Oh,
I don't
100%.
do enough gatherings of
Yeah,
friends.
I feel like we're kind of at that point in our life. We did this with Halloween. We did like a pumpkin carving deal.
You know what we should do? I'm going to say this on air so there's some accountability.
Okay.
We should rent out the clubhouse downstairs
Oh,
and have
nice.
a group of people over.
That would be super
And like
fun.
extend it past the
Yeah, just have a little
the
Christmas
essentials.
party.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun.
That would be a blast.
Yeah. Let's do that.
I'm in.
Okay, cool. I don't know the logistics of that. I tried to look it up one time, but I think you got to talk to somebody.
I'm tight with Ivana.
Okay.
We're homies.
Y'all have talked a bunch.
We've had to hash some things out.
That makes sense.
So-
You had some issues.
So I feel like I'm in good standing with her. And I
Okay.
could probably be like,
You
let me
figure it
rent
out.
this
Let me rent it.
now. free.
Well, be careful.
Nah, I'm not gonna be mean. But yeah, but anyway, how did we get onto that?
We're just catching up and
yeah.
Do you feel as though the topic today would have a lot of content? Should we move on to the segments and get out of here?
I kind of peeled some of it back.
Oh, did you?
Because
okay.
I do feel like we could have had a lot of discussion today.
Okay. I don't want to go
be time. Yeah.
I don't want to go too far over
how long we're going.
What did you say? Conscious.
Cognizant.
Cognizant?
That's what I said.
Conscious of time, cognizant of time.
Feels
Whatever.
good.
I don't know words.
Feels right to me.
I did a crossword puzzle today, or
Just
actually
to
the past
sharpen the
2
mind?
days over retreat.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
How was your retreat?
It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Really?
We played. Obviously the sessions were good. Worship was good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I played soccer for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours straight.
Soccer. Yeah.
And it was. I mean, I am so sore.
Oh, I'm sure.
Everything from like mid-core down is just toast.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't play soccer, so.
Well, I mean, that was the game that people were playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't play basketball or.
We played a lot of
played
basketball
soccer.
at our retreat, and it was fun. It was cold and rainy though.
Oh, that's
Y'all
a
had
bummer.
a really nice day.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
I also I'm gonna blast this out there. You know Layla, right?
Oh, yeah.
The dancer. She was doing some little dance stuff over on the basketball court, so I went over and was trying to mimic her. And apparently she was telling me, and I did multiple things, but apparently I have like innate good dancing skills.
I feel like that's something we've known for a while.
But like this was like I was doing like the little she was
like
teaching
you
me
have
steps,
technique.
and I have technique.
That's interesting.
She was telling me that like what I did yesterday in 15, 20 minutes takes regular adults weeks to learn.
Really?
That is what she was saying. I can't tell. I still don't fully want to believe her and want to think maybe she was just hyping me up so I wouldn't leave or whatever.
She is a rather encouraging person.
But I also, other people were there like commenting on it
and
they were saying the same things.
How does that make you feel?
It was good. I don't love being the center of attention like that necessarily.
Okay, well
it's not where
Then here's a question for you, because I received a picture last night.
That's different though. That's my party trick. Continue.
Full splits. You were just full splits in this picture, in what appeared to be maybe on a stage.
It was on a stage, and that picture actually was staged because your mom didn't get a picture of the original splits.
I figured because the timeline didn't add up. My mom had texted me that y'all were playing a game and that you busted out the splits, which I was like, of course, that's what he does. And then I received a picture probably 30 or 45 minutes later, and I was like, there's no way that was. It had to have been later.
Right.
So
yeah. No, but no, that's
if it's the splits, you're cool with
right, because that's my party trick,
Yeah.
and it's a quick little thing, and people go crazy and they get out of there.
Right.
But like the continuous eyeballs is what's not my favorite thing in the world.
I can see that. How many people came up to you post splits and said something?
Probably 5 at least.
Yeah.
And then it continued on today.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's like those are like small
But
little
that's
conversations.
different. That's different than like you being up in front of a group of people.
Absolutely.
And presenting something or doing something and like the attention is on you.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I just don't. That's not where
Not where you thrive.
Not really. No.
Yeah.
Maybe I could, but it's not a thing that I do on a regular basis,
Right.
and so I don't have any like history of comfort with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do. I have to do that
Well, you have
quite
to.
regularly.
Yeah.
So.
But you kind of grew up
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you get that as a kid,
Oh.
it's much easier to
absolutely.
carry into adulthood.
Yeah.
I was kind of a shy kid.
You know what's an interesting thing kind of on this, and then we can move on.
Okay.
Something that I've realized over the last few years, I would way rather, I say rather, as if we're just talking about comfort level, I would way rather be speaking to a group of hundreds than like 30.
Interesting.
It is significantly harder to speak to a group of 30 to 100 than it is to do like 100 plus.
When have you spoken to 100 plus?
Well, I maybe spoken is the wrong word, like leading worship or things like that. But I mean, I've spoken at church. That's more than 100.
Okay.
But like speaking to a smaller group where you're like,
Just because it's more intimate? Like,
it's like you essentially, this is what I've noticed. when you have a larger group, that group becomes faces. Does that make sense? And
actually, I totally know what you're saying.
You can kind of remove yourself from
a little bit of dissociation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have what you're saying, and you can just do that. When there's 50 or 40 or 30 people in the room, and you're looking around, like you're seeing individual people,
right?
And so
you know what? I would agree. I would agree with you.
More difficult.
Yeah,
you're seeing their expressions or lack thereof. You're seeing their reactions to what you're saying. Like,
right.
You're looking. I could be looking around and I'm speaking, and then I look over here, and that person is completely not paying attention, and this person's on their phone, and you know what I mean? It's like,
right.
You see all of that. Whereas if you're on a stage and there's 200 people or 150 people, it's like it just kind of becomes more of like a crowd.
Right. Yeah, I remember doing like speeches in like speech class, and that's freaky. But then when I did our graduation speech,
right,
like you can kind of, it wasn't that bad.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know I'm on your side now.
Yeah, one of the most difficult like speaking things I ever had to do. We did this like preaching workshop when I was an apprentice, and we split it up into really small groups, and so there were like 4 people.
Oh.
Yeah. And so you had to give up, and it was like a norm. I don't think it was like normal in length, but I think you had to, do like you normally would.
Right.
And it was just really,
you got to make sure you make eye contact with every person. You're constantly
going back and forth between 4 people sitting 5 feet across from you.
That's rough.
It was pretty rough, but it was also a good experience. Anyway, but I just thought I would take note of that. Let's do just a quick football check-in.
Football check-in, okay.
And then we can go to guess that year.
Okay, cool.
So first, with our little football check-in, I mean, so I guess when was our last podcast? 4 weeks ago?
It was a while ago, yeah.
So we've had quite a bit of college football. I think I've talked before about this other pool that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. You have. Yeah.
I'm just crushing it.
Because you picked K-State in that group,
and
right?
Tennessee. Unfortunately, they both lost yesterday, but they've both put together so many top 25 wins that I'm just cruising.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Are you top of that pool?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's cool.
So that's fun. With our team, so I got K-State. You have Wake, is that right?
Wake, correct.
And then Holly picked... we haven't even addressed...
Oh, we haven't addressed that yet.
Sorry. Holly, she's no longer...
Oh my gosh.
She's sleeping.
If I seem distracted today, it's because I am doing content and producing at the same time. So she's asleep.
Ironically, she's just behind this wall right here. So.
But she is the soundest sleeper of all time. Really? She won't even hear.
No fan or anything?
I don't know. I don't think so.
You do a fan, right?
I have 2 fans.
Yeah. You have to. Yeah.
It's not even necessarily for the sound. I love the airflow.
See, I'm a proponent of both. But I think if you were asking me which one do you primarily use it for, it's the sound.
Really?
I cannot stand hearing what's happening outside of the room. If I'm trying to sleep and I hear doors or noise of any kind outside of the room, like I'm gonna hear it. And it's just...
Even when you're in deep sleep?
Like in the middle of the night, probably not. But
like falling
going
asleep?
to sleep and in the morning, yes.
How long does it take you to fall asleep, you think? And we get so sidetracked on this show. It's crazy.
It doesn't take me very long.
I mean, pillow to...
Oh, well, you're talking like when I choose to rest my head down?
Yes. Pillow to Z's, it's 5 minutes.
For you?
Tops. Yes.
Yeah, that's probably... I mean, I would guess maybe even under.
It could be within 30 seconds for me sometimes.
That's how Lindsay is. Lindsay will literally fall asleep in seconds.
Yeah. I mean, I can really do it. There was something that I taught myself. I don't know where I got this from. I don't know how I learned it. But I got a breathing thing. And I can just slow my breath to whatever sleep breath is, and I'm out.
You ever heard of I think it's the Marine way of going to sleep or something like that?
No.
Man, this is...
It doesn't matter. Let's move on. We're going to get so sidetracked.
Hey, good call. Football.
Wake, Ole Miss, K-State.
Okay, so Ole Miss is, I believe, 6-2. I think they had a bye week this week.
Okay.
Second in the SEC West.
Oh.
Behind LSU, who beat Alabama last night. I have to say something.
Okay.
I've thought about this as the year's gone on. In our What You Think About College Football podcast, I made a statement about Alabama.
Okay.
Returning both of their coordinators this year. And there was a stat going around that when Alabama has returned, obviously, their offensive and defensive coordinators, they have gone on to win the national championship. I think the last 2 times they've done that.
I don't think that's going to happen this year.
It's literally not going to happen.
Will they make the playoff, you think?
No, they can't. They already have 2 losses.
Oh.
They lost to Tennessee and they lost to LSU. So I don't think they can even make the SEC championship game.
Wow.
So, and they play Ole Miss this weekend, which like legit could be a loss. I don't know if it will be, but it definitely could. So like Alabama, this is the worst year they've had
in years.
I think since they lost to Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl in like 2011 or 12, somewhere around there.
Wow.
So, anyway, I was wrong.
Okay.
And that's fine.
That is fine.
Fine with that. Here's my worry. You want to hear about my worry?
I want to hear your worry.
Alabama is doing so poorly this year that they're clearly not going to make the playoff, which means they'll probably make a New Year's Six Bowl. My worry is if TCU happens to miss the playoff by a certain, if they lose to Texas this weekend or Baylor next weekend or even in the Big 12 championship game, I don't think they'll make the playoff. The playoff committee is looking for a reason to not put TCU in this playoff.
Which kind of makes sense.
It makes sense. It's fine.
It's frustrating.
It's though. SEC bias. It's brand bias. Like someone said the other day, if you were looking at this same team with this same record and all of that, but it was OU on their helmet, they would be ranked number 4 in the playoff.
That's 100% true.
Absolutely. Or Texas, because Texas has 2 losses and they're ranked like number 14 or 15 now. Yeah. If TCU had 2 losses, they wouldn't be ranked top 25.
No, so not even close. Yeah.
It's a thing. But it's also a money thing. TCU has a much smaller,
right?
They have a much smaller alumni base.
It's impressive that they're at where they're at.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, I could get on that, but I won't. But
you're getting there.
I am. But all that to say, it could set up that a 2-loss or 3-loss Alabama ends up making a bowl game against good old TCU. And here's the thing: Alabama has losses, but they're still a really good team.
Absolutely.
And so. That could be a bummer.
I don't know if TCU could compete with the likes of Alabama.
There's a possibility. Interesting. We'll see how TCU handles Texas this weekend.
That's true.
We'll see.
Texas
only lost by 1 to Alabama.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean much. It's matchups and all that.
Right.
But anyway, Kansas State lost last night to Texas, which is their 3rd loss of the year, so that they're 6-3.
But they whopped OK State last week, right?
They sure did, 48-0.
It's wild score.
I still think Kansas State has a road to the Big 12 championship game.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still going to do fine. I feel good about them as my pick.
How's Wake doing?
Wake played. Who did they play? That might have to be something you look up because I can't remember off the top of my head. They played. It was a ranked matchup yesterday. I wish I could remember who.
We're about to lose power to this laptop. Yeah.
How bad?
It says your Mac will sleep soon unless plugged into a power outlet.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
If we still have 5%, we'll be fine.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I haven't used a Mac before. This is really hard to use for me. It shouldn't be this hard. In fact, that's one of their.
Yeah, how do you not know how to use a Mac?
I just couldn't find it, dude. Hold on.
This is great podcasting.
Well, it's... Oh, they lost to NC State yesterday.
So that
they're 6-3 now.
So that's still fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
So right now, Holly's beating us.
Right. But they're unranked now. They were ranked.
Wake is unranked?
Yeah. Bummer.
That is unfortunate.
Well, that concludes the college football check-in.
We'll check in next time.
Do you have a thing you'd like to shout out?
Nope.
You don't have anybody? Not a soul?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I can't think of anybody.
Gosh. Hannah got a soft shout out last week. I'll give her a full shout out this week.
Cool.
She's a
thinker through and through.
She's a thinker through and through. Yeah. That's
great.
Committed.
You know what? This is a great thing. You know why she deserves an extra shout out?
Why?
We went to trivia this past week.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I think she's come to trivia once or twice before with us and has not performed well.
Well, trivia is hard.
Trivia is hard. And the trivia that we go to is pretty tough.
It's tough.
There's African geography, there's science, chemistry. It's It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Hannah had like 3 questions.
Two or three for sure.
And I mean like that, I don't think any, like the rest of us would have gotten.
And they were right off the bat.
Right. She knew it.
Yeah.
So she was a valuable member of our team this past week.
So shout out.
Shout out. That, I suppose, brings us to our next segment.
And it's time
for
Guess That Year.
How did you not think of it?
Oh, we're just going to go back and forth? Guess That Year. All right, William.
Oh, let's go.
It is time for Guess That Year. I'm going to give you 5 facts about this year, and you're going to tell me what year it was. In this year, you know what? I should have picked my facts before I led into this.
Look at them?
I hadn't even looked at them, no.
You were just going to roll through this
straight? Yeah, I was. The problem is that this is going in order.
You know what would be kind of fun?
What would be fun?
If I just randomly guessed a year before I know any of the facts.
Guess a year.
And then 1761.
Okay. In this year, the 17th Amendment of the United States Constitution is ratified by Congress.
Okay.
In this year.
Wait, the amendment was ratified?
It was ratified.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, that helps, I suppose.
In this year, the 39th Kentucky Derby ended with Roscoe Goose winning aboard Donerail.
Great.
In this year, Yankees commit 8 errors and still beat the Tigers 10-9 in 10 innings.
Just in a game?
In a game.
Okay.
Just a game. Also, Astros won last night. I couldn't care less.
They're cheaters.
They're cheaters.
Congrats, I guess.
Oh, losers. I hate Houston. I'll say it on the air.
I'm with you.
Just the whole city.
The whole thing, man.
Gosh, this is a bad guess that year segment, and it's all my fault. I'll be fully frank about it.
We said we were shaking some rust off.
That's in this year, Romania declares war on Bulgaria.
Oh, okay.
And let me give you something from later in the year, because this is it's an order of. In this year, MLB Washington Senator Walter Johnson wins his 36th game. How is that a thing? Let me give you a better thing.
It's 2 baseball stats.
Yeah. Well, the baseball's been around for a while. That kind of gives you a clue of where we are.
I mean, yeah, it does give me. It gives me a floor.
It does give you. Well, yeah, that's true.
Which I think we've talked about when baseball was like first. And it was a lot earlier than I thought, but
way earlier. In this year, the first pilot parachutes from an aircraft.
Ooh, that's very helpful.
Yeah, and that's your last fact.
That's great. Okay.
I'm going to tell you right now, 1700s was off.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
I just had I just thought I might give it a shot. Okay. 17th Amendment was ratified. We had some baseball stuff, and then.
First parachute
out of a plane. Okay. Let's go.
Oh, and the Bulgaria war.
Bulgaria.
Yeah.
I want to say that the Wright brothers and that whole deal was like 07, somewhere around there. So I'm going to go
2007?
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of work done. Let's go 1914.
Oh my gosh, you were so close. It was 1913. That's pretty cool.
All right.
That's very good. I like that. I like that.
Let's go. That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
It ended up being great.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay.
Let me pass this back to you.
Pass that over to me because I have a question for you, Max.
What you got, William?
I think this is going to be a fun one. Who did you vote for?
That is not what we're doing. They can already see it, so I clicked the button too soon.
Oh. What do you think about what you think about Christian music?
You know what, William? That's an interesting topic, and I'm glad we're going to dig into it today.
Cool. I'm glad too.
I don't have any like.
You don't have any.
Well, no. I don't have any like concise thoughts that I can say. One, I would say it's important. Okay. I grew up listening to it almost solely.
Okay. Cool.
And I'm excited to talk about it. Do you have any first, just quick little quick little one-liners about it?
I kind of alluded to this earlier. This is a topic that we could go all kinds of ways with this. Mm-hmm. And I have some things that I am excited to I guess a caveat. This is, we've said this many times. Like, we do this as a hobby. This is fun for us.
Correct.
We don't, in any way, shape, or form, attempt to sway anyone's opinions on anything most of the time. Unless we're like, this is the thing. You should.
Right.
Which is,
We also have very little authority on the subjects we're talking about.
Yeah, most things we talk about. We've said it over and over, like, we know that this is an entertainment podcast, mostly for our family and friends. So, like, we're not attempting.
And those 3 Germans that keep listening.
That's true. Yeah. Which, let's go, Germany.
Careful.
I know. Yeah. Good cars, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's move from that very fast.
Yes.
Yeah. So this topic is one that I think we could and I think in some ways we will kind of jump into a little bit more depth than we have on some of our other topics. Mm-hmm. Just because of the nature of the
subject.
Yeah, of the subject. And so we hope you enjoy it. We hope it's something that, maybe gets you thinking, but in no way, shape, or form are Max and I trying to convince you of anything or sway anyone's opinions.
Correct.
On Christian. It's Christian music. It's a very niche genre, and we'll get into that. But I just wanted to say that, so just in case people see this and they're like, what the heck? What is this?
Right.
So
good little caveat.
Thanks.
That was appreciated.
I just thought it was necessary. But yeah, so I have a similar. It's ironically, in the car. So Lindsay and I typically drive to church separately because I go to lead worship, but I didn't this morning. I just didn't want to. I just said I'm not doing it.
I don't think that's what happened.
That was off. Someone else was doing it. It's Dion. So
Stain,
baby.
Stain, baby.
And we were on our way. We were on our way to church, and listening to some Christian music, some worship music on the way there. And there's just a very nostalgic, Sunday morning drive to church, listening to some worship music.
You know what? I make it a point to do that on Sundays.
My parents, when I woke up every Sunday morning, speaking of being able to hear things outside of your room, there was always worship music playing in the house on Sunday mornings, and then we would listen to it on the way to church. So I have a lot of memories, and there are some 90s and early 2000s Christian songs
that are bangers
that I will hear and I could cry. There's just, the nostalgia is so fierce in my heart.
Right.
That it's been a part of my life for a long time. I also have some dissenting opinions about it. There are some things that I really don't like, and there are some things that I think really reflect a worldly entertainment type culture.
Okay.
And again, it's we can or don't have to get into that some, but so yeah, it's I'm not just love it, it's all great, it's the best, but I do see, like you said, I think it's a great thing. I think there's a lot of good in it, and I want to talk about it.
Let's do it.
Where are we at time wise?
We're at 33.
Oh, that's beautiful.
We can go to an hour. We can go to hour 15. We usually have around an hour 15,
27 minutes,
or we can go a little bit longer. It's fine.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I just wanted to provide. Okay, so I'm a context guy. I'm a history guy. I cannot. It is against my nature to be able to talk about something without being what is this? Where does it come from? What's the deal? So I did some research and put together just some stuff, some first principles, just some foundational stuff. So some of the, if it sounds like I'm reading, it's because I mostly am. But essentially, worship is essential to the Christian faith. Mm-hmm. And really, if you think about any religion, worship is a big deal. It's essentially religion, most religions are based off of we have this deity or a god or a being of some way that we see as higher than ourselves, that is worthy of our devotion.
Right.
And so we submit ourselves to this person or being, and we worship them. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously very foundational, very key. The Christian religion has used music for a very long time as an expression of worship to God.
Is that I lost the word. Just keep going.
Okay. And maybe it'll explain it. Essentially, the history of musical expression is an interesting thing that I think teaches us not only about like Christian culture, but also about like the culture of Christians and like Hebrews all the way back through history. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting as you go back as early as Exodus, you have examples of songs that like, I think I wrote this down. So yeah, like the first song that we hear in the Bible or that we read is in Exodus 15, which is right after Moses and the Israelites come out of Egypt and into, they go to Mount Sinai. The first thing Moses does when they get out of the Red Sea is there's this chapter that's like the Song of Moses, and he's praising God for like freeing them and taking them out of captivity. And then like you see more and more of that in the first 5 books of the Bible. And then the Psalms is like a collection of praises, laments,
right,
exaltations, like just all these different kinds of songs for like the Christian life.
Right.
Which I think, so there, I wrote something in here that I really liked. So Marty Solomon, he is a campus minister, and he's also a host of a podcast called the Bema Discipleship Podcast.
Bema.
It's the best. Here's what he says.
Shout out Nick Reagan. I don't know if you listen to this, but shout out.
Thank you so much for putting us on that podcast. This is what Marty Solomon has to say about the Psalms. The importance of music in our communal walk is immeasurable. There is something in our heart and soul that has to sing. As you find yourself in the cycle of struggle and redemption, there are moments where one of the few things you can hold on to is song. In our dark moments, we don't turn to statements of faith or belief, but we find solace in song.
Okay, wow.
I know.
I've never thought about that.
How true is that, though?
It's very true.
Yeah. That's
just hearing that kind of moved me.
It's a moving statement
emotionally.
And his whole thing in the podcast about the Psalms is he very much is one of these guys theologically that believes that the whole of the scripture is a narrative and it's teaching us about God all the way through. And that song and the gift of the Psalms is essentially this statement of like, in your life, as you journey through the struggle of the highs and lows of following God, you're going to need to sing. Like you'll need to sing as you walk. You'll need to sing as you cry. Like there is something woven into our hearts that needs to express, and song is a gift that like helps us do that.
How interesting.
Right. But I think about it and I'm like, yeah, like in general, I don't find myself a very expressive person.
But you sing.
But I sing. And I love it. And music. Okay, so here's a great story and an example of this. So in 2020, like 2 weeks before COVID hit, Lindsay took me to go see the Eagles. And the Eagles are like top 3 all-time favorite bands. I grew up listening to the Eagles. They're the soundtrack of my childhood. And we went and saw them, and it was this amazing concert. Well, for the following week, it was a Sunday night, the rest of that week, I just found myself just kind of emotional. And I was like, I'm not a super emotional person. But like I would find myself working on something or sitting and just like sitting back and being like, gosh, man, like that was such an experience. And I like finally thought about it and ended up, this was before we were married, ended up writing Lindsay a letter just saying like, you don't understand what taking me to that concert meant to me. Like it was this moment of like, I'm experiencing songs that are more than songs. When I hear Hotel California or when I hear any Eagles song, I'm thinking of like being out on the lake with my family on Labor Day.
Right.
I'm thinking of running around with my buddies like early on in elementary school when like, yeah, I would listen to him with my buddy and his dad driving to Rangers games. Or you know what I mean? It's
right.
Like, that's what that is. And I think music has the ability to do that in a way that like, yeah, I love that he says when we have difficulty and when we have trouble, like we don't go like, oh, what's that statement from our missional belief? It's
right.
Like nobody does that.
Right.
What's that theological truth? It's like, no, we think of this line in some song that we sing on Sundays.
Right.
And
no, I
like,
totally.
Oh, and I can hold on to that.
I totally agree. Like, this is interesting, and it perfectly lines up with what you're saying. But when I was stricken with COVID and on the brink of what sometimes felt like death.
For sure.
When I was up at night, that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
There was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And it just felt like the first thing to do was just to sing.
Which is crazy.
It's crazy.
But I think it's exactly
what you're saying. It's built in.
It's what he's getting at.
Yeah.
And when you look at the book of Psalms, something that I love, which a lot of people don't really realize and think about. So you have songs of praise, adoration, you have songs of exaltation, you have songs for travel and pilgrimage, which was a big part of the Jewish,
what they did.
Yeah, what they did back in the day. And you also have songs of lament, which I think we can get into this later, but for now, it's like having psalms written out. I think it's Psalm 23. No, maybe it's Psalm 13. Yeah, Psalm 13, I think. It's just this psalm of like, essentially David over and over is like, God, where are you? Mm-hmm. It appears as though you have forsaken me. Are you ever going to like come back? You know what I mean? It's like, and I think a lot of us can have, you read that, and I think you have this ability, or at least you can relate in such a way that's kind of like, oh, I feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the spectrum is just wide on what kinds of like songs we can sing and how we can do like essentially worship God even in all of those different emotions and like things that you feel and go through throughout life. And so anyway, that's some of the history. As the Bible moves forward, you start to see worship through song in the temple, in the synagogue, and then in the early Christian community. Ephesians 5 says, encourage one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Mm-hmm. Sing and make music in your hearts to the Lord. Like that's Ephesians was an early Christian, a new, like essentially like what we might say a Gentile or non-Jewish church
plant.
Yeah. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Startup.
Yeah. So essentially the easiest way to do this is like, that's the foundation. From Ephesians to today, we've had 2,000 years of differences in tradition and ways that people have worshipped. And, we could get into that. The interesting thing that I kind of want to take us is like, how did we get to where we are today?
Okay.
With modern Christian music.
I got an interesting thing for you.
Sure.
I took a history of music class.
Oh, did you?
In college, yeah. And so I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I do know that it kind of, we have what you have, and then kind of in the early church state in the medieval times, whatever, we have chants, which are kind of songs, and then we kind of get to hymns, and then to where we are now.
Yeah, I didn't know that you did. It wasn't a church music class, was it?
No, it was at Collin.
But they just talked about like.
I mean, that's like what music did through the ages. So
right.
There was no way to get around it.
So I like that you said that, because essentially the church and culture at large have like influenced each other at times in history. Mm-hmm. And instrumentation in worship is kind of like a big deal. It was for a long time. I think for a lot of us now, we don't really think about it much.
Right.
But yeah, for many years, people just sang hymns and just like would gather and read the scripture together and then would sing these hymns together. And then in the medieval or the Middle Ages, 10th, 12th century, Western Christians began using organs in their gatherings, which was kind of like the first time that in like an instrument was like instituted like with regularity in musical services.
Is that true? Because the Bible shouts out the harp and the lyre on a regular basis, and I don't know. There's also trumpets and such. Right. But was that? I guess that wasn't necessarily involved as an instrument in song.
So something we don't think about is like those things were not used. They weren't like widely available.
Obviously.
Right. And so yeah, I mean they're you got David who had access to like all these things, but your average person was not like making music with harps and lyres and trumpets and whatnot.
That's fair.
Which is also an important thing to take note, like to notice as we move forward in history. That's one of the reasons that the music industry like doesn't really take off until post World War II. Like in the sense that we understand it, right? Like there were always famous singers or famous composers and things like that,
right?
But like your average Joe wasn't buying a guitar in 1910 or in really any time before that,
right?
And so we're getting ahead of ourselves, but that is a factor. So anyway, my computer died. So luckily or hopefully
we'll figure it out.
We got this.
I got thoughts in my head.
You got thoughts in your head. It's fine.
It's fine.
So yeah, you have organs, and then around the 16th century and the Reformation, when you kind of get this Protestant Catholic split, you have differences in opinion of like how or even if instruments should be used in worship. The Protestants, ironically enough, were like pretty anti-instruments in worship. I didn't know this until I kind of researched it more, but instruments were kind of seen as like people just had this essentially like predisposition of like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that in church. Like it's like,
I wonder if instruments were used by like jesters and stuff like that from the kings and
that
such.
Might be worth looking into, but I don't know.
We can't now because your computer's dead. But it's fine.
Yeah, that's on me. I should have charged, but I didn't charge. And now we're here.
We're fine.
But yeah, so Catholics were actually pretty okay with it. Protestants in general were not. These are just massive generalizations. But then in the like 1900s, as different cultural movements started happening, first one that comes to mind is like these revivals that were kind of like Billy Graham, right? Like these big, tens of thousands of people revivals.
You shouted out Billy Graham as one of the first revivals. Is that? Well, like John Edwards and all those revivals and stuff.
Right. Those you're talking about like the Great Awakening.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Those are earlier, like 1700s, I think.
Right. The Vivals, not the revivals.
Right. So yeah. But that's a good point. Because there were other people that did things like that before Billy Graham. But Billy Graham, I think, is one of the most like people might know who he is.
That's fair.
So you have people like that, and you have these massive arenas being filled with people. And then at the same time, sometime in there, you've got essentially the like hippie movement.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And you've got like this whole anti-war, free love, all this kind of deal, mixing with the youth of America. And at like one of the prominent identities like that was super core to that movement was music,
right?
But this was also at the same time where like religion in America like was still fairly prominent, and so you have these people growing up in churches, they're singing songs. Well, then you're hearing this music on the radio, and you got your friends that are like into all this hippie stuff,
right?
And so that's why you kind of hear people joking, back in the 60s and 70s about like the devil's music, right? It's like people were worried that this cultural secular music was going to pull their kids out of Christianity.
Right.
Which in a lot of ways it probably did. But I mentioned this earlier, you start getting this mix of like, okay, culture and Christianity, they influence each other. To what degree is that a bad thing? To what degree is that a good thing? Like that's a totally different conversation,
right?
But it's at play.
I would agree, yeah,
100%. And so, what ended up happening is you had these people who were like, okay, the kids, the youth, love music. This is where they're going,
right?
Let's integrate this into our churches. Let's use bands and musicians to write Christian music, and let's sing them in our churches.
Right.
And that ended up kind of producing a movement of like, this became a fairly normal thing. Obviously there was pushback in a lot of ways.
Right.
And this is all happening as things like the radio, like obviously the radio had been around for a while, but like popular radio was coming around, and the music industry was becoming a big deal. You have the Beatles and the Stones and the British invasion all coming over to America, and you have very popular people like touring and making music professionally.
Right.
And all of this is kind of swirling together. And then over time, you get now we're sitting here, and like the last 30 years, there's been Christian radio.
Right.
You've got popular, very well, like successful, really well achieved people like Michael W. Smith, or what's that? Amy Grant.
Oh, I forget about Amy
Phillips,
Grant.
Craigs and Dean.
Phillips, Craig, and Dean.
Phillips, Craig. Yeah, Craig. Yeah. I wanted to Craigs and Deans.
Put some S's on there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about who else. So Keith Green, you like Keith Green,
Love Keith
right?
Green, yeah.
He was like way back, like 70s.
Yeah.
He was part of that like kind of hippie Christian movement. Then you had this weird thing in the 80s where like people took that to another level, and they're like, man, well, all these rockers are going crazy, so let's just do Christian rock. Like, let's just make a metal band, but just write Christian songs. Like, so the Christian industry essentially got to a point where, in general, people were going, okay, here's where we're headed. Here's our opportunity. So let's jump in. Mm-hmm. The music industry is out there. It's crazy. It's one of the most successful industries in the world. Our young people and all people are influenced by it. Why not hop in and offer people music that would like point them to Jesus?
Yeah.
And so in obviously very short and in super concise summarized terms, that's how we got to where we are.
Okay.
And now we sit here today, and you have giants in the music industry who are solely Christian bands.
Right.
And I guess so that kind of gets us to where we are. I guess my first question would be like, what do you think about some of that?
So I have, golly, you dropped a lot on me. I have a thought. It's not an original thought. I've heard this from somebody else. But it kind of goes along with what you're saying, in such that Christianity has kind of influenced art. I think a lot of early paintings and or sculptures was Christian based. You have the Sistine Chapel. Right. You have a lot of the other stuff. What?
Yeah.
Oh. And then you have contemporary and secular art come into play, paintings and sculptures and all that. And then the same thing, like kind of what you were saying, happened with music. And then it got kind of, I don't really want to use the word infiltrated, but for lack of a better word, infiltrated by the secular. But what it seems to me is that Christianity has had a hard time keeping up with music.
Okay. What do you mean keeping up with music?
And I'll say this, that I separate worship music and like contemporary Christian music.
I'm glad that you said that. Yeah.
And I think we need to. I mean, I do that. I don't think everybody has to, but I do think that there is.
Sure. There's a difference.
There is a difference. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and I think in general people understand that, which is why you have.
But I don't know if they do, because you have KLTY playing everything.
But they play both.
But it's kind of it can be confusing.
So you know what's kind of interesting? I think this is a random example, but I think so. Like Spotify, they'll separate. It'll be like modern, like contemporary Christian music, and then it'll say like worship music.
Okay.
And you have your Hillsong, Bethel, Elevation, Maverick City. And they're these bands that are writing songs for worship. But then you have these, off the top of my head, like Jeremy Camp, Toby Mac, Lauren Daigle, some of both.
Right.
Who else?
You got like Chris Tomlin, which you kind of he goes back and forth.
He goes a little bit of both.
Stephen Curtis Chapman kind of goes back and forth.
Right.
Casting Crowns.
Sure.
More what you're talking about.
Yes. Okay. This is hard to
It's hard.
Yeah. I think some artists do both, but some artists definitely separate. And I think there is a difference. One is popular. It's essentially popular music. Here's a good idea. Here's a way to put it.
How do we talk about this well?
You know how like there's like popular country music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like essentially it would be as if you and I took some pieces of paper and we just wrote boots, dirt,
trucks,
whiskey,
beer,
right, and
women.
Put it in a bowl and then just and wrote a song.
Right.
It's Christian music is like doing that with Christian words. Cross, grace, mercy,
grave,
love, freedom, right?
Yeah.
Throw them in a bowl, pull them out, and now we write a contemporary Christian song.
With 3 specific chords that everybody else uses.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's the whole thing about a 4-chord Christian song is like a very real thing.
4, sorry.
Yeah, 3, 4. I mean, it depends on what you're doing with it. But yeah, it's a real thing. You can, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but worship, I think, a lot of times is more, it's a song or whatever written for the purpose of like, we're going to sing this in our gathering to worship God.
Right.
Whereas like a Christian music song is like, oh, this may not even be to God. It might just be about him.
Right.
Or about a Christian thing.
Mm-hmm. How do I say this? I should have thought this out. I think that Christian music can be, it can get boring because of the fishbowl thing.
Yeah.
And I think that when that music is being created, you're kind of forgetting the humanity of Christians.
Okay.
And I'm gonna shout out Price. What is that? Gable Price.
Gable Price.
So that music feels more genuine to me.
Uh-huh.
And even Need to Breathe. Mm-hmm. As they are Christians in a band,
right?
Not necessarily a Christian band. Right. And even like Lecrae does this kind of thing because they are Christians making music,
right?
Not making music for Christians.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, I know what you mean by that.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a lot. Absolutely. I 100% agree. So, for example, I'll every once in a while I'll listen to some Christian radio, and as a worship pastor, I'll just say this.
You got to keep hip with the times.
Yeah, but at the same time, I over and over and over again, people will be like, "Oh, you should do the song. You need to," and I'll listen to it, and time and again, my thought is just like, this just isn't saying anything. There's nothing like
shout out some songs that you think that about. I want to do that. Let's do this right now.
I mean,
I know the first one that's on top of your head. Yeah.
What is it?
It's the artist is CA.
CA. Is it Corey Asbury?
Yeah.
What's the song?
Reckless Love.
Okay. So that song, there's a difference between me not liking songs and me thinking that the songs just aren't communicating something. I actually think Reckless Love is communicating a pretty interesting message. It's saying like, oh yeah, by the way, like God he doesn't just love you. Like he loves you to the point where he did something pretty crazy to get you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So the communication there I think is good. My problem is there are sometimes songs that become so large and so overplayed and overdone that like it almost takes on something more than the song.
Okay.
And Reckless Love, I think, kind of took on this like young adult Christian hipster vibe, like, oh, just the reckless love. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
just
I know
that
what you're
kind
saying.
of gross, cringy, like Christianity.
Uh-huh.
Another example of that is Oceans.
Oceans was a hurricane.
Okay, it was a hurricane. But you know what? Oceans is a great song. Mm-hmm. And the bridge of that song, it's like, Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders.
Mm-hmm.
Like that whole thing. There's some cool stuff in there.
Yeah.
The same thing happened. It just became this like, you saw like Spirit lead me merch, and you saw it became this stamp for the like mega church young adult Christian of like, oh, this is my jam. Like this is for me. You know, it just kind of took on a cringy Christian thing. Uh-huh. And also, side note, do you remember when we went to New York City? I said that weird. New York City in like, when was that? 2014?
Yeah.
15 maybe?
15, yeah.
It was huge. Oceans was huge. We went to Hillsong, New York.
Right.
Do you remember that at all?
Wasn't it like they dropped streamers from the sky or something like that.
Okay, well, that's a whole different thing. They did this whole streamer thing. So the worship pastor made a comment about riding oceans.
I missed this.
It was disgusting. I mean, he literally, I'll reenact it for you. He said something about like, this was when they were about to play Oceans. Mm-hmm. You know, standing up there doing his whole gross thing, and he was like,
because we went to Hillsong,
right? We went to Hillsong, New York, probably months after. We should fact check this, but sometime within a year after.
It was within the Ocean days.
It was a major Oceans days, and he literally was like, "Oh yeah, when me and whatever the guy's name was, when we wrote Oceans," and like the crowd just went crazy, and that's what he was doing. Right. He wanted that, and I just remember feeling disgusted. Well, then they sang Oceans for probably 15 minutes.
It's so long.
No, it's already long.
Right, it's already long.
But they just
draw it out.
They just the bridge over 30 times, whatever.
Right.
And I just remember sitting there. We obviously had been walking around New York for a long time. I was exhausted, but I just remember sitting there and looking around and being like, "Dang," which is something I want to get into. It's just like, man, I just don't feel like this is what
this is for.
Right.
Yeah.
Like. It very much seemed like an exaltation of a thing in the song. Then it was like, oh, I'm worshiping God right now.
Right.
Which, again, we can get into. But I feel like we were somewhere else, and now we're here.
Well, I want you to hot takes.
Oh, hot takes on songs?
Songs that are empty.
Oh, jeez.
What's that Dry Bones Rattling song?
That's a Lauren Daigle song.
This is the sound of dry bones.
Oh, that's Elevation.
Yeah, I think that one's kind of empty. I can't remember anything about it, but that's the chorus.
Okay, here's my thing. I'll say this, and maybe hopefully this will be sufficient because it's hot take enough. I feel like just in general.
Hot take, right? I'm gonna zoom in on your face alone. Look at that camera.
In general, I don't want to look at the camera. I know the camera's on me. I just feel like there's such a big problem with I'm going to name all of them because I don't want to just single out one. Mm-hmm. Maverick City, Elevation, Bethel, Hillsong, like the whole deal. Because they exist. It's a music industry. Mm-hmm. I do believe their heart is like, we want to create, music we would worship to. That's a thing, but they're powerhouse worship bands. Like, they exist. And if you watch the Hillsong documentary, I don't know if you've ever watched this.
I haven't seen it.
It kind of talks about the rise and fall, not of Mars Hill, but of Hillsong.
Nice.
And dude, they're bringing in, I want to say like tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to the Hillsong brand yearly.
Right. Well, that's something that I feel weird about.
Especially a money-making machine.
Right. And I feel really strange about it when they tour.
Okay.
It's so strange to me that people would buy a ticket to go. Like, why are there even tickets to go to one of those shows? It should be a first come, first serve.
I'll tell you why. Do you want to know why? Because it makes money.
Yeah, but it's icky.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. This is exactly what I'm saying. So people, and this is another thing. They just Hillsong drops an album. You know what then happens? All the churches in the world just go, great. We're cycling through that as our net. So these churches, again, I'm not making a statement about this being good or bad.
Okay.
This is just what happens.
Right.
You have 4: Maverick City, Bethel, Elevation, Hillsong.
Oh, and they're influencing
every church in America.
Right.
And in the world.
Right.
Because they just put out the music, and this is why I take the stance that I do, which is mostly you send me a song, 90% of the time I'm going to say I'm not bringing that into our church. Because, and I say 90, I'm just saying I'm very walls up about this. Mm-hmm. Because we just grab it and consume it and then go,
what's that saying?
My walls are down. I just will take what is popular right now and assume that it's going to be theologically sound and good to bring into our community to lead worship in.
Right.
And so, yeah, I agree with you about all that. I think it feels weird. I think it's hard. Now, that being said, I'd bring some of those songs
right, because
they make good music.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of times a great job with, like, and I've watched some videos here and there of people explaining how they wrote songs and things like that, or where the song comes from. And sometimes people write a song, and again, you kind of use that whole dry bones thing. That isn't the rattle, like. Yeah, the chorus just kind of repeats, like, this is the sound of dry bones rattling, like, open the grave, I'm coming out. Like, I'm like, okay, that feels more like a CCM song than it does a worship song.
Right. Or like It Might Get Loud.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, I mean, that's just pretty much like a rock song.
It's a rock song to start off a concert.
Right. And so, yeah, there are just definitely times where I listen to a song, I'm like, man, this is just a song with some generic Christian adjacent themes thrown in there. Right. Dry bones rattling. Okay, that's, out of Ezekiel or Elijah, somewhere, not Elijah the prophet, not the book of Elijah, that's not a thing, but somewhere in the Old Testament.
The days of
Elijah. And there's a reference to dry bones coming to life. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And the connection there is, that's what happens to us when Jesus comes into our life. We're dry bones, we come to life, right? I get it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the sound of dry bones rattling. It's not worship.
No.
Like, I don't know. So, again, like, I preface that I'm going to say some things that, like, I don't know. I feel like people disagree with that, but
that's fine.
It's okay. However, and then you and I said, like, but there are some non-Christian bands that will write songs like that I will be heavily moved by, and I will see as, like, worshipful. The one that comes to mind, you mentioned Gable Price. He has a song called Heretic.
And I'll preface, they probably are a Christian band, not Christians in a band.
Right. Well, their songs are mostly themed Christian.
They're themed Christian, but they're not played in a... Like, you wouldn't hear those songs in church necessarily.
Right.
So,
well, right, yeah. No, I know what you mean.
I don't know how to word that better.
Yeah.
They're not written to be worship songs, but they are worshipful in their words.
Well, I think worship songs are written musically in a lot of ways.
To be easy to catch on to and sing.
Be easy to sing and easy to play.
Right.
And Gable, like, a lot of those Christian bands that are not writing songs for church, they're still wanting to, like, write good music.
Right. King's Kaleidoscope is another one.
You have really interesting musical pieces and drum solos and guitar solos and difficult vocals and things like that, like, because they're not writing it to be sung in a church.
I like that.
Which is great.
Yeah, that's what
it is. And I think that should happen, right? It's like there should be bands that go like, oh yeah, we're all Christians, but we're not, like, our goal is not to write worship songs.
We're not trying to get our song into a church.
We're just trying. We love music. We're trying to write good music.
Right.
The lyrics will be about Jesus.
Right.
Or what it means to be a disciple or whatever. Right. Like,
and that's something that I don't think is happening or didn't happen, especially in the 2000s in contemporary Christian music.
Yeah, I would argue that is a fairly new thing.
Or their attempt at it was not very good.
Yeah.
Because it all kind of sounds the same.
I think you're right. Like, I remember when Need to Breathe kind of first came up, because we followed them for a long time, and I remember explaining to people, like, oh yeah, like, I'm a really big fan of Need to Breathe. They're not like a Christian band. They're kind of like a rock band, but they're all Christians. And pretty much every album that you listen to, they have one or two songs that are, like, explicitly about God.
Right.
But yeah, it's
something
like,
beautiful,
right? Something beautiful.
Song.
I mean, The Garden. Like, what's that one? You love it, Multiplied.
Oh,
like
great song.
There are songs that I'm like, he's very explicitly talking about God or his relationship with God or something like that. Mm-hmm. But then 8 other songs on the album are not about that.
Right.
But that, I agree with you. I don't think that was the case in the 90s and in the early 2000s. It was like, oh, you're in this Christian genre, like, your songs need to be about friendship or about, like a redeemer of some kind. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Like
and
those
I think
kinds of things.
There are people that I know, or at least they used to have the stance that if, like, it was going to be a Christian song, it needed to mention God.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah.
Because there'd be, like, those songs that are kind of ambiguous. You're like, oh, they talking about a woman, they're talking about God. They're trying to be a little bit,
right.
And they were like, well, if it's a Christian song, it has to mention God. Hard and fast rule.
For sure.
And I do think those can be kind of confusing, but it's still...
That just reminds me that the book of Esther has no mention of God. Do you know that?
It doesn't. You're right.
It doesn't. It's a story about how God is working in a situation.
Yeah.
But it never says like, oh, and then the Lord said this, or Esther prayed to God, and like it doesn't at all. Interesting.
How about that?
Anyway. But yeah, like some of that stuff like really moves me. The stuff that's not explicitly.
Yeah. Continue talking about Heretic.
Heretic, yeah, it's essentially this song about like he's talking about Jesus and how radical Jesus was at the time, and essentially how like following him means you need to be radical in the sense of like your beliefs and your practices. Like if you're following Jesus, you're not following Christianity.
Something is going to be changed in you as well.
Right, this calmed down version of like, well, you just attend a church and you try not to do some bad things and you try to do some good things. Like he's essentially saying like, you ought to look like Jesus. Mm-hmm. You ought to be different. And the chorus says like, offend my mind so that I can know you more.
Yeah.
Break my heart so it looks more like yours.
Yeah.
And I've listened to that song so many times over the last like 2 or 3 months whenever I saw them. And that speaks more to me than like
you turn graves into gardens.
Dry bones.
Bones.
Yeah. In general. Graves into Gardens I actually think is a pretty good song. But anyway, yeah. So, but that like I'm like, okay, the concept of like Jesus should offend my American mind. That is a more
That's a hot take in our Western world.
100%. And it should be that way. That's the whole idea. Is he's saying like if you go to a church and your church is just like essentially complying with all of our American ideals, like you're not following Jesus. You're following an American version of some religion.
Right.
And similarly, so what his prayer is like, Jesus, I know who you are. I know I'm not there, so I need you to offend me.
Yeah.
I need you to break my heart because that's what looks like you.
Right.
Not this. Mm-hmm. That is so much more moving.
Right.
Okay, John Mark McMillan. Similar. He's 100% a Christian, 100% writing Christian music.
Right.
The imagery used in his music is so much more compelling to me than some Christian worship stuff. He has a song called "The Road, the Rocks, and the Weeds." It's all about it's based on the parable of the sower. Mm-hmm. The image he uses is a sequoia tree. Sequoia trees take a century to grow. So the idea that he talks about is like, you're planting something that you're not going to see. Like, but you should plant it anyway.
Right.
So there's this line that says, "Shall I plant sequoias and revel in the soil of a crop I know I'll never live to reap?"
Ooh.
But that, again, so I do youth ministry. Mm-hmm. That song has meant so much more to me than insert general Christian song about like, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. Like, it's like stuff like that. Like, because I think day in and day out when I talk to a student and when I tell them something, when I read the Bible with them, and then they leave and I just think, okay, what's going to happen there?
Right.
I think sequoia tree, plant, God, you're going to grow it. That's not my job. I planted.
Right.
I watered, but I don't grow. You grow.
Right.
And hopefully, God willing, that's something that's going to grow way bigger and take way longer over time than I'll ever see. Mm-hmm. And that's the purpose.
Right.
It's living a life that you're not just building something short and here.
Yeah.
You're building something that's lasting past you.
Right.
That's a concept that's way more meaningful.
Yeah, it's cold in here, but I just got chills from you saying that.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like you can write these songs, and some, in my opinion, go ahead.
It's gotten less poetic.
Yeah. I even think hymns are significantly more poetic than our modern songs.
It just hit me. What is being pumped out is easy to consume.
Yeah.
Easy to replicate. and because of that, it's less meaningful because we're not. I want to be careful how I say this, but people aren't trying very hard.
Sure. Oh, I mean, I would say on the whole that's probably true. Again, there's always going to be songs that, and you just never know that, like, maybe people put a ton of effort into.
That's true.
And then we would sit there and go, yeah, clearly not. But I think in general, you can look at what the purpose of contemporary Christian music is doing, and I think that's true. I think it's clear that they're trying to do something that's easy to sing along to, that's easy to take and, like, put in your church, easy to play along, which, again, the heart behind that I think is great.
Right.
They're saying, like, you have all these churches. You don't need to write all this music. We'll write the music.
Right.
This is easy for y'all to bring in and play. I'm like, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, because I don't think that say your Mav City or Elevation is attacking it from an angle of what can we do to make as much money as possible, as easy as possible, that kind of thing. I do think they're probably attacking it from an angle that's like, we have the resources to make these songs to put into your church.
Absolutely.
But I think that we maybe are giving them too much influence.
Okay, yes, agreed. And I'll say this too on the other side of that before I speak on that. Every band that we've talked about, there are songs of theirs that I love.
Absolutely.
And I use.
Right,
like
right.
Sing in our, like, Maverick City. I thank God we sang it this morning at church. I brought that in, like, we do that.
Great song.
Gyra. I've sung that at CTF. Like, it's a good song. Like, there are songs, and then there are others that I just go, like, you're going somewhere, or you took an idea and you're like blatantly stating something that I'm like, I don't know if that's what the scripture's talking about there.
Right.
Or maybe it is, but I don't know if the best application of that is the way you're doing it. So there's that.
Nice.
I kind of have to burp, but I'm trying not to.
Well, gosh, that was. I should have switched to my face. I didn't hear it, but people watched. People watched
me doing that.
Yeah. That's on me.
But I agree.
Actually, that's on Holly because she's not here.
It is.
No, don't do that. She's tired. In no way do I want it to sound like we're sitting here and saying that you're like your big four or your other people like your Stephen Curtis Chapman or your Toby Max and whatever are not doing good things.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, agreed. So I agree with that. I think we've covered both sides well. I will say another thing. I think a danger of our modern contemporary Christian music and what we see just kind of at large is, you mentioned this earlier, it's turned churches into consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I wish I could count on one hand. I can't. I have had many, many conversations with people about, oh, I go here or I go here because, or I guess rather the better way to put it was, I left here. I don't go here anymore. Why? Well, the worship was this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, the speaker was this.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there could be good reasons there. But immediately off the bat, in my mind, I go, okay, you have essentially said this was not up to par. Like, I went somewhere and the band wasn't very good. Right. And it just immediately makes me go back to, like, okay, so now what we've gotten is a culture, a subculture of Christianity where it's pretty common for people to base where they attend church. More than that, if you're a Christian, you know what church ought to be. It's not just a place you attend.
Right.
You base where you're going and where you plug your life into on your standards of good. Was it up to my liking? Was it not? Right. And
I will say, though, I totally hear what you're saying, but I have been to churches before where the worship and, like, the band was just unbearable. Like, they were just not good.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made that segment of church kind of worthless.
Sure.
And I do find corporate worship important to me.
Oh, well, absolutely.
So, like, if I
So I agree with you. The thing that comes to mind then to me is we put so much emphasis on that experience, which I agree is important.
Mm-hmm.
Like for most of Christianity, people just gathered and sang hymns. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I had an experience a couple weeks ago. I can't remember if I told you this or not, where I went to this church with Lindsay and my grandma. And the median age of the members at this church was like 76.
Mm-hmm.
Very old church. And they do this thing. There's actually one tonight, and I really wish I could go, but I can't. They do it like once a month, and they just call it Hymn Sing. And their pastor is like 70 years old,
mm-hmm.
and he sits behind a piano, and the piano's not plugged into anything. And they have hymn books in front of you, and everyone walks in and sits down, and he'll just go, page 513, and everyone turns, and he starts playing, and everyone's singing. There's no
mm-hmm.
microphones, there's no, and they just do that for an hour.
Right.
And like, one of the things that blew my mind was like, I could hear everyone else's voice.
Right.
Just as loud as I could hear the guy leading. And there was nothing, never was I thinking about the quality of anything, because the worship had nothing to do with what the guy leading it was doing. The worship was all of us singing together.
Right.
So when you introduce what a lot of churches have introduced today, which is professional style worship,
well, and the production of
and
it
the
all.
production, it becomes about that. And so if you don't do well, it's noticeable. But that's because when that person is facilitating,
mm-hmm.
we put so much emphasis and so much like rides on how well they're leading us, not how like important is the body's role in worship.
That does lead into something that I've always thought was kind of interesting, in that when we sing in church, it looks exactly like a concert. Because I have been in a worship what would you say, environment, where rather than looking at a stage, you circled up and sang to each other and got to look around each other, and it was a completely different experience.
100%.
And so I've always wondered what it'd be like if, rather than us looking at the stage and people on the stage looking back at us, if we were all turned around the other direction, what that would look like. We were all looking at whatever's displayed on the backdrop of your church, whether it be a cross or just a screen or whatever. Like, what would that change in terms of how worship is
absolutely
done in a church? Because it's so, if you walked into a church, not like I think about this semi regularly. If I was to not be a Christian, walk into a church and see that happening, I'd be like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah. Is it like a karaoke type thing? Like, oh, absolutely. Which the thing that stands out to me again is like, and I don't believe, like, there is kind of a strain of theology that's like, well, we just got to go back to what the early church was doing. Like, I don't necessarily think that's true. Like, I don't think that the like early church was the height of Christianity, and we've just like gotten worse since then.
No, I wouldn't agree with that.
But
either.
I do think it's interesting to kind of go back and go like, okay, well, what were they doing? And like specifically in synagogues, their gathering, they would gather around the word. And there was one person that would get up and read the word, but it was in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like on purpose. It was supposed to meet. It wasn't just.
It was more communal.
Practical. It was communal. Like, they wanted to be a community that gathered around the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Now our communities look like theaters.
Right.
It's consumerism.
Right.
It looks like it looks like a concert.
Right.
And so I actually was talking to John Von Runnen about that the other day, because I was thinking, kind of based off that hymns thing, I'm like, man, it would be really weird and really cool one day if we did like a hymn thing, but our chairs, like if the band was up front, instead of being up front, that was just a part of a larger circle. And so the chairs start where the stage is and just go like this throughout the...
But still in the middle?
No, as a part of the chairs. Does that kind of make sense?
Okay, yeah.
So, like, you just wouldn't put chairs there. It would be the carpet.
Right.
And then
it encircles over. Yeah.
So we would...
And chairs still in front of the band as well?
No. We would be a part of the larger circle. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. I think I'm confusing it with the time that I did it, and we still had rows, and the circle got smaller the closer in you got or whatever.
Yeah, that could work too. But just what it would...
So my chairs in front was just the circles getting smaller around it, just to make it part of the circle, but not the focal point of the circle.
Right. So this is a good time to jump into something that I wanted to talk about earlier.
Okay.
So lament, right, is this concept of like looking around at the world and being like, hey, things are not as they should be. God, like essentially being able to express grief and pain and hurt to God while also being able to express like trust.
Right.
And so one of the things that Marty Solomon talks about in the Psalms is just how often there are Psalms of lament and what that means for like our modern worship context. And he shares this story of a couple at his church who I think had like lost a child or something. And they showed up to church the following Sunday. And he was like, I don't think... He said, like, essentially the whole time he was thinking, like, is there a song in this set that is fit for where they are?
Oh, right.
And really, when you look at worship music, there mostly aren't.
Right. I would agree.
It's mostly like, you should feel good. You should be happy. Like, you know, it's all that. And there's just not a whole lot of space in worship environments and in Christian music as a whole
to be real with how you feel.
Yeah, to walk in on a Sunday and be like, I really didn't want to be here because life is hard.
Right.
So is it okay for me to be here? Or do we communicate in our songs that whatever you have going on, you should be able to come in and be like, yay, I'm singing and dancing and happy. Right. And I just found that really interesting because I'm like, yeah, man, like on the whole, like most Christian songs are just about God's goodness, God's faithfulness, which is great. We need those reminders. But I think we also need to have space in our worship for people who like are hurting badly.
And I think most often the people that are there are more in that space of hurting. Not necessarily.
No, I agree. I think you hear people say things like, oh, well, in a room this size, this is probably going on. Well, yeah. Like, especially as you get into larger churches, which is probably the least likely place that they're playing those kinds of songs. Right. But there's,
because of consumerism again.
Right. Without a doubt, there's difficulty there.
Right.
Which one of the things that's been interesting, just as I've led worship over the years, we have such a small congregation that like there are days where I'm planning worship and I'm thinking like, well, I saw on Facebook yesterday that this person is going through this thing.
Right.
And they're going to be here on Sunday. Oh, I read our church newsletter the other day and I know that these people, you know, this person lost their parent or this you know what I mean? It's like, and I try to like factor that into stuff, but the reality is there aren't a lot of worship songs that provide space for lament.
I can think of like two.
Right. And it's probably the same two that I'm thinking of. So, because I can really only think of two, I think, as well. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, but I agree with you. It goes back to like, well, we want to put this consumeristic show together. Right. And so,
well, and I've heard churches talk about that as a way to like get people in the door, and once they're in the door, they can then hear the truth or whatever. And I just think that
seeker friendly type deal.
Right. And I just think you have to walk a fine line.
Oh, 100%.
Because I don't need smoke on Sunday mornings.
Right.
And you only need a few lights, and the lights don't need to be different colors.
Right.
And you don't really need a camera directly on the person singing.
Right.
When you have, I mean, when those some churches will have like different people lead each song, that's totally fine. But you don't need the camera zoomed in on them one time and zoomed in on this person this time, and that's not what it's for.
No. And you know what? and I kind of provide this role in various ways, but just to play the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think all those people in general are doing what they believe is best. And I think it's one of those things where I'm like, man, I really believe in my heart that like that isn't best. I agree with you there. But I believe that the people that like get up and lead worship at churches like that do it with the best intentions.
Yeah, I don't think they're asking for the camera to be on them necessarily.
No.
And on the flip side of that too, I do think that the people that are working in the production are doing it for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
The guy manning the camera, he's worshipfully manning that camera
well,
that
he has
Sunday.
that skill.
And it's his skill, and he's performing it and he's using it.
That's
and
great.
so I don't disagree with that.
Right. No, I agree with you. It's a much larger thing than just being able to be like, well, that's good, that's bad.
Right.
But
all right, we are at 1:31.
Wait, what?
We've been going for an hour at this, so
an hour and 30 minutes.
We're at an hour 30.
Okay, wait. I have one more question.
Well, I wanted to do hot takes.
Wait,
but you can do one.
Takes.
Huh?
Didn't we already?
Well, no, but I have another hot take that I wanted to say.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah,
That's
but I mean,
question,
like one hot take.
That's
each.
fine. Yeah.
I think Sloppy Wet Kiss is better than Unforeseen.
Jeez, it's not.
It is.
It's not.
It is, because what is an unforeseen kiss? What is that describing? That sounds creepy to me. When I think Sloppy Wet Kiss, I'm thinking of like a puppy, and it's an innocent thing running up to you. It's a sloppy wet kiss, or a baby. Mm-hmm. It's an innocent thing. When heaven meets earth, like this innocent, happy thing happening. An unforeseen kiss?
I think
who wants an unforeseen kiss?
Well, fair enough. I think maybe what he's going for there is like we await it, but we don't know when it'll be. So it'll happen, and it's unforeseen. No? You don't think so?
I don't. When heaven meets earth, like an unforeseen kiss?
Yeah,
I'll
give it to you.
Think about in normal life, if that's what he's describing, an unforeseen kiss.
It would be not good.
It's not welcome.
Yeah. That's a good point, actually. I will push back on that by saying, like, can you ever sing that song without the words sloppy wet kiss, like, taking your attention away from the song? Because I can't.
I
distracting.
welcome the sloppy wet kiss part.
Then you're a better man than I.
I just think
you explain that very well, and I agree with that.
Okay.
That is a good hot take.
That's my hot take.
Okay, I have a question for you.
What you got?
Because we did a whole lot more parsing through and discussing kind of the different points of worship music, but I just wanted to know, do you have any specific songs that like have meant a lot to you, either in your life, in certain moments, or like, do you have songs from growing up that you remember being like, oh dang, like this was a big song for me, like, and I've used it?
Man, I wish you would have asked me this before, because this is hard to think of on the spot.
What's a song like that you recall from like being a kid, or maybe, I don't know, maybe even not from being a kid, but just like,
man, I wish you would have asked me this earlier.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go first, so I can kind of think
about it.
So
I have a Christian throwback playlist in my Spotify, and I've got some bangers on there. Because I believe there's like a golden era of Christian music, and it was that like late 90s, early 2000s, Michael Dubb, Third Day, those OG bangers, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there, Michael W. Smith, like he has a handful of songs that like I go back to. I'm like, man, these songs, like I can picture like being in the car as like a second grader and hearing, Prince of Peace or Amazing Love. What else? Open the Eyes of My Heart.
Oh,
like there's just stuff like that. As far as like songs that have really meant a lot to me, Phil Wickham, he has an old song called Divine Romance.
Okay.
That I used to listen to a lot growing up. Kind of like just personally, like I would listen to it just on my own and just think about God, and it was very impactful for me. And then there's a Casting Crowns song called Your Love is Extravagant that I always loved, and it kind of really meant a lot to me. And those are the first two that come to mind. I'm trying to think of There's a song, an old Christian song called For Future Generations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of got that like early 90s, like almost late 80s kind of vibe to it. But the chorus just talks about like standing firm, like not bending or breaking to the way of the world, and like being a light for future generations. And I always thought that was such a neat concept.
That's cool.
And there's a nice key change at the end, which
that always gets
just takes it to the top.
Yeah.
Could you think of anything?
Well, one, this is like the hardest thing in the world for me is just naming a song in general. So
like, I can't remember the song or the lyrics.
Right.
I didn't even listen to the lyrics.
Right. That makes it already hard for me in the first place. The first one that kind of comes to mind though is New Wine.
Oh yeah.
I think that a repeated thing in my life that the song kind of communicates is just like that my wants and my will don't always align with what God is, his will probably is.
Right.
And so I'm always hoping that mine would be changed to look like his.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that song kind of aligns with in that. And so
that's a great song.
Yeah.
It's a really cool, like it's really well done musically too.
What's that? Is it called "So Will I"? What song is that?
So Will I.
Is that? I like that song a lot too.
So
I think it communicates.
I think, like amazing,
Right?
Like and very powerful. There's a few verses in there that talk about like.
Well, and let me say this. I think the regular singing of it in church makes it lose its value.
It definitely
because when you have a song that says "When the mountains bow in reverence, so will I." If you're, because I think so often in church we can sing a song, and you're just singing the words you see on the screen and not thinking about what you're saying.
Yeah.
But when you hear that line and
absolutely,
and I think we don't, because of consumerism, we're not taking in the poetry of what's there sometimes. But like, that hits.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, I wish I could remember the specifics of the line, but it's later in the song, and it talks about, it makes a reference to 8 billion, either stars or something, and it's talking about how many people are on the earth, and then it says like something about every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I, or something like that. And it's like, but he doesn't say like when he says 8 billion, he doesn't express clearly that it's about.
Well, and billion is different from he's used a million previously in the song, and billion he ups it. Yeah.
Which is just is crazy. That is a phenomenal song.
I thought of one more.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it's Days of Elijah.
Oh yeah.
And I think one reason for that is, as you've probably seen the video, but there's a video of troops singing it.
Oh, I have seen that.
I love that video so much because in that moment they don't care.
I know. Yeah.
They don't care that they're in the military. They don't care that they're all grown adults, that they've probably gone through things that you and I will never see in our lives. But they're doing the motions, singing this song.
I know.
They can't sing very well.
Of that.
I don't either. I don't know the story.
I've seen the video, and it is very moving.
But it's moving, yeah. And I always, whenever I hear that song, I think about that video.
Oh, that's a great song. Man, good stuff. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good too. Christian music, we need it. But we can improve on how we,
for sure.
what it is and what it's used for, and
100%.
How to make it, how to distribute it, how to interact with it.
I just now realized you're wearing a Dolly Parton shirt.
Yeah, I did that.
I literally didn't know that until right now.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, man. It sure is. What's your favorite Dolly Parton song?
Couldn't name. Don't ask me that.
9 to 5.
9 to 5. Yeah.
9 to 5.
Hannah's gonna kill me.
There's no way she'll listen to an hour and a half of this.
She probably will.
Should we do another, like, if you listen to this whole podcast? What's a word we could have somebody text us? I always think that's funny when we go along.
Probably Dolly.
Dolly, great. That's phenomenal. How did I not think of that?
Text us or DM
Dolly
the
to 93141 for a chance to win. Anyway.
Cool.
Okay, well, I thought that was fun.
I had a good time. Enjoy your meeting later on today.
Thanks.
I haven't had lunch yet, so I'm gonna
What?
It's late.
It's 3:00.
My watch says 4 because I haven't changed the time.
Shoot,
yet.
daylight. We're gonna have no more light here pretty soon.
Yeah, it's gonna die off here in a couple hours, isn't it? I hate time change. It's almost gone away. It's passed in the Senate to abolish it. We're just waiting on the House to ratify.
We don't know. That's gonna change a lot. Like, that's gonna really change our lives.
Is it though?
I really think it is.
It could, but I don't know the consequences. That's why it hasn't been ratified yet.
Because I don't know. I mean, the sun setting at 5:30 is what I expect from November to March.
Yeah, but I hate it.
I hate it for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'm kind of like, oh yeah, this is what the holiday season's like.
I guess that's true. I do. This is gonna sound weird, but I do like doing stuff at night in the dark.
Yeah.
There's something exciting about it.
You know what
and
the
that
Bible says about that?
Yeah, and that's not what I'm alluding to.
Because your deeds are evil. The men loved the dark.
I'm ending this episode
because their deeds were evil. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah.
I know what you mean though.
Yeah.
So
there's fireworks. There's festivities that can't be done during the day that are better at night.
Christmas lights. What are we gonna do with Christmas lights if the sun doesn't go down until 7:30?
Yeah, like in July, you gotta stay up till 10 to watch a fireworks show. I'm not staying up till 10 to go drive around and look at Christmas lights.
I'm probably not doing it anyway.
You don't like to look at Christmas lights?
I do, but everywhere you go, it's like if you go to a good neighborhood for good Christmas lights, so does everyone else.
That's true.
And then you're just sitting in bumper to bumper traffic.
We need to end this episode.
All right.
Have a good day.
Bye,
Thanks
guys.
for watching.
See you next time.
We appreciate you thinking with us.